everyone. Welcome to the Mogul Bar Show. With me, I have a very special guest. I have Jennifer Strout. She is the CEO and founder of MotivateU. And coincidentally, she's also the inventor of the technology that's patent pending behind the company MotivateU. It is a new fitness. It's a new way to enhance people's fitness. And it's not a Peloton. It's not whatever it is that you're using now. It's something different. I can go on about how amazing she is, but I think I'm going to let her just do a soft intro before we get into it. Jennifer, please.
Hi. Yeah. As you said, I'm the CEO and founder of MotivateU. And I don't know if you have a specific follow up from that that you'd
Not at
like
all.
to dive into. Okay.
No, not at all. I think basically, I know the story. I think your story is well, the impetus behind the company is sort of as old as time, that necessity, I forgot the saying, but forces motivation. After the birth of your second child, you had a need for, a gym that was acceptable to you, and you couldn't find one. You couldn't find one that accepted that was a safe place, or a place that would accept your children. And so you made your own place. It's like, what was that like? Did you just walk out of the gym and say, so be it, I'm gonna do it myself, screw it?
So I actually tried to go back a few times. So I think I kept the membership for about 3 months, but it was about like the third time I tried to go back to a class, and my kids like wouldn't even let me like leave them there. And the second time I went back, I didn't even end up doing anything for myself. I just ended up trying to get them comfortable with the facility so I could go back. But the commute was also pretty rough in terms of like when I could get there, and it would take me about 45 minutes each way, which was more time like away. At least the kids were in the car, but at that point, my youngest did not like the car, so he would just scream the entire ride. So it wasn't quality time, that's for sure. Um, and so, yeah, I went home, and I remember actually sitting in the parking lot. Of the condo that I lived at then, and being like, what am I going to do? Like I want to get back into working out. And I just don't know how, why there's not a solution out there. And so that's kind of when I actually came up with my solution, but I was like, somebody's got to be doing this. And then I did more and more research and found out that nobody was. And so then I also looked into more like, well, what are the existing solutions? Can I just use one of those? And I was just kind of disappointed. I felt like the technology that was out there was mostly like 1990s tech, meaning that it was, I call them digital filing cabinets, just like places to hold on to stuff and track things. But there wasn't really anything in the fitness industry for what could be done if we were taking some pieces of ideas from other industries and using them.
No, I mean, I think that's what's key, is like you saw a need. And let's talk a little bit about a little bit more about the technology, because it is something that's sort of, well, it is different. No one else is doing this. And this tracking technology that you developed, it is a need. Nobody realizes that, but everybody over the pandemic was doing, some sort of a Zoom class, of course. But there is that huge gap in what you can do in a physical class and what you can do remotely. Because like you pointed out, the instructor cannot physically see, let's say it is a class of 30 people, he cannot see 30 people and identify what Jennifer's doing right or wrong, what he needs to advise her on. Same thing with Gabe or John, whomever. And that's a huge like flaw in that system, or a huge gap. And you brought that to light, but then you took it a step further. You built something for that. What was it like, your aha moment, when you just decided, okay, this is what I'm doing, and you went out and did it?
So I actually came up with the idea in January of 2020, so before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And then when the pandemic hit, just like everybody else, I took some time to get used to the idea that it wasn't going anywhere. So I worked in hospital emergency departments for about 7 years. So I was pretty confident by the end of January that this was going to come to the United States. But I was disappointed in the fact that I guess we kind of were unprepared as a globe. So it became clear it wasn't going anywhere by the summer. Um, and at that point, I decided like I should probably just go ahead and build this because um, there already was a need for like parents or people who are working a lot and don't really have the time to go. But now there is a need from the trainer's perspective. And after I worked in the hospitals, I went back to school again. I'd already had my master's in counseling, but I went back to school for a biochemistry degree. And I actually ended up teaching yoga and fitness instruction while I was doing that. Um, and so seeing it from like that point of view now with all the gyms and that were closing down and not able to hold classes, um, it was like now it's not just something I want, it's something that like the trainers need to stay open. And a lot of the other existing solutions were direct to consumer. So they're just avoiding the gyms and the fitness centers altogether, which was making it even worse. And those solutions came pre-pandemic too, right? So there already was a push
Mhm.
for people to work out at home. But now if you remove that human element, we're also missing something, right? So it's like nobody was quite getting it right. We don't want to get rid of the trainers. We want more personalization. That's where medicine is moving to, right? More personalization, not less. And yet the solutions that were going into people's homes was tracking the results, but not really giving them the feedback that people want from another human. There's
Yeah.
only so much that robots can do well. We also need humans involved. Kind of have to get that balance right.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. No, I mean, I think so. You were already working. You've been, your story is online for anyone. I'll put it in the show notes as well. But your grandfather worked for Apple, gave you a computer at 4, and you were pretty much building things since you were 4 years old. So this was nothing new to you, per se. But for the people around you, what was their reaction? Because usually when people decide to take on something, either an industry that's already existing or create their own space within that industry, there's usually some sort of pushback, or there's some sort of like, okay, sure, give it a shot, but not really a lot of confidence. What was that like for you? Because you've got a pretty good team around you from what I saw online.
Yeah. So um, my grandparents raised me, and they definitely wanted me to do the whole college thing and everything. And my grandfather had several businesses in his life, but I don't know if he really would have wanted that for me. So in a sense, like my grandparents had both passed away before I started this, and I wonder to this day, like what have they thought about it? Um, but everybody who I interacted with otherwise was super excited and like, this is amazing. Can I be a part of this? And so I was like, well, maybe my fears that like, my grandparents wouldn't have wanted me to like go in this direction. They just wanted me to like, basically my grandfather said, get as many degrees as you can, like just go to school and do that kind of, those types of jobs. And working in the hospital system, you need degrees for whatever you're going to do, right? So I was very indoctrinated into that kind of mentality. Even though he kind of did something different, he went to school for teaching, and then he ended up doing sales at Apple, and then having his own businesses. But he always told me he had wished he had been a professor. So it was kind of like he was living vicariously through me, I think, in a way.
Okay.
Um, but as there's one advisor that reminds me of a lot of my grandfather, and my grandfather actually managed him at Apple 30 years ago, and now he's on my advisory board. But he reminds me of him, and so his encouragement and his enthusiasm actually makes me kind of think my grandfather would have been like, "Hey, you know what? This actually is pretty cool."
Nice. That's
Yeah.
pretty cool. Now, with the business, initially you started basically just focused on, I don't know if enterprise is the right word, but you were focusing on the trainer side of thing.
Mhm.
Now you sort of are focusing on the individual. Why did you make that decision?
So we just opened it up because we were getting a lot of hits to our website from individuals, probably from like the organic social media marketing that I was doing. And people are kind of like, well, what can I use? And I was like, well, you have to first, hook up with one of the trainers or gyms that's on there, and then you can only start using the product from there. Um, and we didn't have that ready yet, so people are like, asking lots of questions. And so I put up a mock page that was basically like a waiting list page, but there was no way to sign up yet. And I put it up and saw how many clicks that we had gotten. And it was like 390 something clicks in 24 hours. And I was like, you know what, maybe I should make a waiting list for this and see how many people sign up. And we had over 500 signups for the waiting list in less than 48 hours when I made it about like a couple weeks later. So we still haven't built anything yet, but it seems like, okay, we should probably do that. The other side of that, though, too, because that alone probably wouldn't have been enough, was that I was trying to walk trainers through how this process worked and set it up. And I had done over 100 user interviews with both trainers and studios and clients even before I launched the company, to make sure there was a need for that. That was I was beyond my own mind, um, but I still kind of had to like prove out that people wanted to use it. For like so by me going through for my trainer experience and setting up myself as a trainer and then having consumers be able to come in through there and go through that whole process, I was able to answer questions that I would have probably not thought of the answers to before. So kind of anticipating what questions would come up because I was now experiencing that from the trainer side, literally walking through the whole process of onboarding my own clients and how they go through that. And so it helped with the marketing and sales for the business side too, because it was basically building a case study.
No, I think that's great. I think that's the ultimate way to build a business. You are the user. And I think that's what something that I read on your website that, you're also the user of the solution, not just the builder. And I love that because really you are your first customer. You building things because you want to build it. So you should build it for yourself first, is what I tell people, and then build it, add on to it with what people need, with what the other users basically come to. But you're always your first customer. So I applaud you for that, and I love that because I think that was just fantastic. Um, but what's we were talking earlier, before I hit record, about your kids and your dog. What's that been like? Because you don't just manage a business, you manage a household, you manage a lot. It's never just like, oh, I do this only. It's you don't just have like 100% of your focus on this. You have a life as well. What is that like to manage both, to balance that?
Yeah. So there's a lot of things that people say about balance, but I think the ones I've liked the most are when they're like, nothing's ever in balance. It's just you have to kind of like shift from one to the other, right? And so
Yeah.
it's making sure you always come back around to that one thing. Um, but this is not my first business. So my very first business was more like a solo prop, consulting type of thing. And when my first son was born, he had trouble sleeping. And so I set my office up in a walk-in closet in his bedroom. And I did that because I would have calls at different out like crazy hours of the night because I worked international, like with international clients. And I'd be able to take a call. I could hear him even if he was just starting to stir, kind of comfort him and then not miss a beat with the call. And it was faster than, hearing the monitor and then running and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And so from the beginning, I kind of like figured out how to make it work,
Mhm.
working off hours. I'm also a night owl, so it's kind of easy for me to, spend some time with them when they're awake and then work, and they go to sleep at 7:30 to 1 is usually like core hours that I always work. And then I work around the other times. But I think they're also like a big driving force for what I'm doing. Because, when I have like a bad day or I just don't really want to do it, I think of also like what my grandfather went through. Like he wanted to be a teacher, but he couldn't make enough money to support his family. And my grandparents and their kids were actually sleeping in the living room of my grandmother's sister's house when they first were trying to like get on their feet. And he did what he had to do to make a good
Mhm.
life for his family. And so I think about that too. Like sometimes stuff you have to do for a business is not fun. At least once a day, there's something that I don't want to do. But then I remember like why I'm doing it so that I can, do more fun activities with them and show them things that I got to experience growing up and hopefully share the world with them.
No, that's awesome. I think that's great. I think it's people take don't actually fully appreciate what an entrepreneur takes on and does, because it's never just them focusing on a business alone. And I agree with you with the whole balancing act. One of the things that I like to say is it's never balance. It's more about harmony, because you're always going to spend, unfortunately, more time at work. And that work, that extra percentage that you spend at work does provide for a very good personal life, but it's never an equal balance. It's impossible. And yeah, you just have to find the right harmony for it, but it's never a balance. But yeah, that's awesome. Um, what's next for Motivate You? Because you're growing. You opened up around on WeFunder, I believe. What's next? Like, where do you see this potentially going? Because the world, with the world opening back up, even though you were in business before the pandemic, with the world opening back up, what, how do you think that Motivate You sort of fits in a world that is desperate to get back outside, so to speak?
Yeah, so our solutions are like hybrid built. So if people really still want to track their form. There are some really large classes. Like I've been in classes that are over 50 people, right? And they're super fun, but you're not going to get any feedback. So even with a live class, it's hard to get that. So the trainer can set up their device to catch their motion, and then any of the clients can do it from home. You can actually use it outside. Our product works outside. You can be in the studio and also taking the class and be able to track how you're doing, because our system automatically tracks all that data for you. um, and so that helps with, I think, people keeping up with their routines and seeing their goals move forward. The other thing is, so having worked in the hospitals and experiencing the hospital I worked at try to implement like an employee health program, it's
Mm.
really hard for them to track if people are doing it. It's one thing to like open a video. It doesn't mean you're actually doing the exercise. And even if you are you doing it correctly? Are you potentially going to injure yourself because your form is off and there's nobody to give you that feedback to let you know? And so, like, the long term goal is to do more employee wellness and health and try to help people figure out what's that right balance. Like, if you were not exercising for a long time, should you take yoga 3 times a week, or should you start with two? Like, when you're tipping over, if you've had surgery on something, again, what's this right balance? And as we can get that data to help tell people where they need to be and what they need to be doing and prevent injuries from wherever they're taking them, that will also help as well. So that's the
No,
long
I,
term.
I would absolutely, I would absolutely love this, because I suck at working out, but I have done better when I had a trainer to tell me everything that I was doing wrong, whether it's, how to sit properly when I'm lifting or just everything, because my form was completely just wrong. Like my wife is infinitely better than I am. And with a trainer, it was just better, which obviously I haven't done in 2 years, but it's just, yes, I think that's amazing. And kudos to you. I think this is great. Like you found something that people needed. And I know that the trainers will appreciate this as well because they were probably tired of, you know, getting the feedback that they weren't maybe people didn't enjoy the class as much because it was virtual. And at least maybe now it'll change some things for those people that do want that feedback like myself. So that's pretty
Right.
cool. Um,
Yeah.
did you have any trouble attracting people like your first users, your first customers? Did they understand right away? And by customers, I know that it was businesses that you were going after first, but did they understand right away what the vision was and just say cool, or they were just like, well, let's do a POC first and see what happens?
Yeah, we actually were getting inbound leads before the product was completely done, just from
Nice.
posts and stuff. So we are getting that, and it was nice to hear too, as we like tightened up the marketing messaging, how people understood that more. But we made a video, so we made like a video. I think it was around March, and uh, of last. So I guess it's been a year now. That kind of showed how it it would work. Um, and the video is like a person visiting a hotel. And this is one of my examples I still love, because if you ever go to like a Sheraton or a Marriott, or any hotel chain that has a gym in it, if you walk past that gym, there's never anybody working out in it. I actually went to one hotel during the pandemic when it was kind of like one of those dips, and I went past the hotel and that and I took a video because I was like, "Look, there's nobody." Like, you never see anybody, right? Because it's a very like weird feeling, right? You don't have community with you, but
Mhm.
now you can still work out with your trainer wherever you are. And so again, we don't want those trainers to disappear. We want them to still be able to meet people where they are. And if hopefully if you get the flu, like one year you don't go into your gym, but you don't stop working out. Like you can when you're starting to feel better, but you're still contagious, there's that terrible period where it's like you want to do stuff,
Yeah.
but you know you shouldn't for like everybody else in society.
Oh yeah.
But sometimes it's hard, and especially colds, sorry, they're like never ending. But we don't want people coughing all over equipment and stuff. So it'd be better
Of
for
course.
everyone if
Yeah.
we could work out from home when we can.
No, I think that's amazing because like I think when trainers, they think of Peloton or these other organizations, they think of, well, I'm losing my job to, a virtual thing. And you're right. If anything, this is just continued or added, potentially added revenue um, to them because you're giving them a way to still do their job um, if
Right.
people are not coming in. Because
Right, to
this is
be competitive against those companies, and there's no hardware required, which is huge. You don't
correct.
have to
Yeah. I
have that
think that
space
is.
and the extra cost.
Yeah, and I mean that goes such a long way. I'm just thinking about the potential of people that will use this because they do want to work out, but some people maybe they don't know how. And speaking for myself, I know the very first time that I went into the gym that I can remember as an adult in my early 20s. I mean, I'd worked out in like school gyms and stuff like that early on, but in my 20s when I first went to a gym as an adult, I was so intimidated and I was very embarrassed because I'm like, I don't know what to do. And everyone here is clearly like rocking and rolling. And I think this adds like another level of, hey, maybe I don't have to go into the gym. I am embarrassed. I am an introvert. I can do this from home and be comfortable.
Yeah,
So I
definitely.
really think, yeah, like I would have loved this in my 20s.
Yeah, I think a lot of women that we spoke to too when we were first doing those early interviews, and going forward, but I guess I hadn't remembered like how many people had this thought was that women are like, I don't want to be ogled at because I'm always like, yeah, there's always less women in the gym, and it's like I knew that I'd heard that before, but it was amazing to me how many women were saying that that would actually prevent them from going to the gym, that they just didn't want to deal with that.
Well, that makes
There's also
sense.
something to be said about the increase in social anxiety from the pandemic. And now, like, it's hard to get back into that, right? So, like, can you take baby steps? So, we have it so you could take classes where you could turn your camera on or off, meaning that, like, you can have other people in the class see you, or you can just have the trainer see you. And so that helps people like take those baby steps towards then being part of that community, and then maybe eventually getting into that gym without having to go from like 0 to 60 and go straight in and just be expected to know what you're doing and where you're supposed to go. And even finding the class, I can remember going to a really big gym when I moved once and finding the location of the right class, right, like, and not opening the wrong door. It's it's
Yeah.
it's like even those little things, like, are a lot if you haven't been working out for a long time, and it's you already had to get all the courage just to get there, and then one of those things wrong. I think it was on maybe Twitter recently, one of the social media sites where somebody said that they went in and they just were, like, kind of overwhelmed by, like, all of the directions you can go into the gym, and they just turned like, they took a towel, like, as if you were leaving almost, like, wiped their face, dropped in thing, and, like, left.
Uh,
And it's like now
yeah.
it's just like, how do I get back? And she was actually asking for advice, like, how do I get myself to go back through that door? I don't think I could go through that door again. And
Yeah.
that, there's so many people that need to work out. And our point is to meet people where they're at,
Hmm.
not to get to the people who are already like, this is my thing. I know what I'm doing. Because there's a lot more people who don't know that, working out's their thing or how to get started. And most of the models for getting clients into facilities is targeted at those people who really, really are already gung ho, but that's leaving the majority of the population behind. That's really unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I see that as being so helpful to just, the people's self-esteem because it's different. It's a different way to do it. And yes, you don't have to be worried about going into the gym and being intimidated by all of those. I know I've been intimidated by that because I'm like, going in and I'm just like, yeah, I'm just going to get on the elliptical. I just, I don't know what else to do. And there's nothing wrong with the elliptical. I'm just I'm like, was that my intention for going? No, I wanted to lift weights, but I got very intimidated by what I saw. And then it's like, I walk out, or like, maybe not walk out exactly like that person that you mentioned, but it is something similar. And this is something, yeah, I think this is so good and so helpful. And I'm like, thank you for doing this. Um, so awesome. Jennifer, I know you're busy. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I'm going to put everything in the show notes, but what do you want to leave people with before we go? Where can people reach you? Um, yeah.
Okay, so I'm probably most active on Twitter, and my DMs are open. I really do try to talk to people, whether it's a business or consumers, answer questions. I actually hold Twitter spaces too, so I'm very open about like the process of like starting businesses, running businesses, and also like the workout process and anything like business related or this specific business related wellness. Um, and everything in between. So I'm a very open person, and I'm definitely happy to connect with people. And I'm also happy to tell people if they connect with me and I can't help them, who I think might be able to, and point people in the right direction. But I think if you're listening to this and you're even considering getting healthier or taking that next step, I would say look into a program, whether it's ours or a different one, and at least like sign up for something. Like, right, everything's the first taking the first step. A lot of times people think, well, I already need to know like what my goal is and how I'm going to get there, but you don't. You just need to take the first step, and then from there you could take the next one. And so try to make that. You don't have to wait till next January to get started. And if you're a gym or fitness center, I understand that a lot of the technology that's been out there has not been ideal. And so we're trying to onboard ourselves as many people as we can to make the process smoother so that, you don't have to worry about learning new things. But I also made it super intuitive to be like the least number of clicks as possible. So everything we try to do in 3 clicks or under to set up a class or do whatever it is, add a video, just make your life easier on both sides. So we just want to help people reach their goals.
That's awesome. I love that, Jennifer. Thank you so much for your time. I will be putting all of your contact info in the show notes. And thank you again. And this is awesome. I think you're an amazing person for doing this. So thank you.
Thank you.